Coco Gauff was the youngest player in Wimbledon history. At the age of just 15, she defeated one of the game's biggest icons and was named the future of women's tennis, all before she was old enough to get her driver's license. But when she failed to replicate her historic showing and struggled to break through against the top players, some began to label her early success a complete fluke. Coco made it her mission to prove them wrong. She took a page from the book of her tennis idols and started to speak up, both for others and for herself. With her newfound confidence, she broke through to the French Open final and made clear that her first major victory was only a matter of time. However, she got on the bad side of a flock of angry seagulls. Her opponents tried to psych her out by taking too long between serves, and even her own coaches got so annoying she had to tell them to pipe down. Despite all of this, Coco continued to improve, but just as she was on the cusp of winning her first slam, her semifinal match was interrupted by a protest over the only thing that might be more unstoppable than her service game. 1 hour, 1 bottle of glue remover, and several dozen NYPD officers later, play resumed, as a stadium full of tired fans watched Coco set herself up to secure a title that many said she would never win. What's next is anyone's guess, because at this point she's pretty much unflappable. Just don't draw her as an ugly cartoon character.
Up until like 10 minutes before the match, I was just reading comments of people saying I wasn't going to win today.
Coming through as a qualifier at Wimbledon is a feat in and of itself. Coco Gauff did it as a 15-year-old. Training on hard courts in the Florida heat, she didn't receive an invite to tennis's biggest spectacle until just 5 days before. But the whirlwind trip across the Atlantic and the unfamiliar grass surface of the All England Club didn't seem to slow her down, as she pummeled several more experienced players and secured her spot in the main draw. Her first-round opponent, by some poetic twist of fate, would be American tennis legend Venus Williams. Growing up in Florida, Coco idolized Venus and Serena, and had even trained with Serena's old coach Patrick Mouratoglou. But despite Venus's sizable experience advantage, Coco shocked the world, winning her first match at a major in straight sets. Afterwards, Venus said that for Coco, the sky was the limit. Billie Jean King tweeted that she was a big fan. Despite being a relative no-name before entering the tournament, Coco's matches were the most viewed in the US on every day she played, and commentators were already talking about how she could be the heir apparent to the sisters who had won a combined 60 major titles. All of this was a lot of pressure for Coco, who rode the wave of hype to just her second ever major appearance at the 2019 US Open. Now on home soil, she faced the media circus and the immense weight of expectations, but played well, squeaking off a few narrow wins in her first few matches. When she came up against world number 1 Naomi Osaka in the third round though, she quickly learned just how far she still had to go. After the crushing loss, a tearful Coco rapidly made for the exit, but an understanding Naomi comforted her teenage rival, and in a heartwarming moment, convinced Coco to address the adoring crowd. Just a few months later in Australia, Coco got her revenge, proving that she was capable of going toe-to-toe with the world's best.
2 years ago, I lost first round in juniors, and now I'm here. Like, this is crazy.
Speaking up like she did in the first Osaka match wasn't always easy for Coco. Sometimes though, she knew that speaking up was something that just had to be done. So when protests over the killing of George Floyd erupted across America during the summer of 2020, Coco took the mic at a demonstration in Delray Beach, Florida and spoke her mind, quoting Dr. King and letting the world know that silence wasn't an option. It was sad, she continued, that she was up there protesting the same things her grandmother had over 50 years before. Coco's grandmother, it so happened, was one of the first black students to integrate Delray Beach public schools, so her granddaughter understood the importance of standing up for what was right. In doing so, she joined a long line of women's tennis stars in lending their voices towards the cause of equality. All of this was way bigger than tennis, but tennis remained Coco's passion, and after her breakthrough, she had landed on some difficult times. This included losing in the early rounds of tournaments against players she was favored to beat. Whenever she faced top-seeded opponents, they overwhelmed her convincingly. Despite climbing steadily in the rankings, her critics bloviated that she was overhyped. Her forehand, they said, remained a technical disaster, and even her more constructive supporters, like former star-turned-pundit Mary Jo Fernandez, suggested she should take 6 to 8 months off from the tour to fix it. Coco, rather than crumbling under the criticism, used the doubts as motivation. She got in the habit of browsing Twitter just minutes before matches, reading all the terrible things people wrote about her and committing them to memory. She later told interviewers that she remembered their exact usernames. Because to be the very best, maybe you do have to be a bit obsessive. And her obsession eventually delivered her results. In the 2022 French Open, she stormed through the field to reach the final, in which she faced new world number 1 Iga Swiatek, who had won an astounding 34 matches in a row. Once again, Coco failed to hold up against a higher-ranked player, winning only a single break. After the match, she watched as Swiatek hoisted the trophy, her intense stare a lousy mask for her disappointment. Coco was happy for her friend, but she wanted it to be her. She had imagined winning a slam since she was 8 years old after all. But what was on paper yet another lopsided defeat marked a profound shift in Coco's mindset. Up until this point, she realized she had been playing for others. It was about time she played for herself.
I was just going into the matches trying so hard to win, but not for myself, but for other people.
Playing for herself meant tuning out the outside noise. But some noises, it turns out, are so intrusive you can't tune them out. Coco learned this lesson during her match against Jody Burrage at Eastbourne in 2023. With a commanding 5-1 lead and serving for the first set, Coco's timing was thrown off by a mysterious screech, which she quickly learned came from a particularly agitated seagull. The seagull proceeded to fly across the court several more times, moving the crowd to laughter. Who knows why the bird was so worked up, but a patient Coco waited until the avian intruder had made its point, before she proceeded with hers, winning an unusually memorable match. Another memorable match came in the first round of that year's US Open against German veteran Lauren Siegmund. With her back against the wall down a set, Coco looked to pick up the pace and regain momentum. However, her opponent repeatedly watched the serve clock go to 0 on her own serve, and repeatedly failed to ready herself in time to return Coco's. A little gamesmanship perhaps, but the chair umpire seemingly refused to call out the bad behavior, ruling only a single time violation for an infraction which occurred countless times. Upset, Coco went over to the umpire and respectfully pleaded her case. Clearly frustrated, she maintained her cool, but the NYC crowd came to her defense and made sure to vocally point out all subsequent violations. This, according to Coco, was an example of what her new coach Brad Gilbert called winning ugly. Ugly or not, she was winning, and in front of a raucous crowd, it was hard not to get carried away. Even for Coach Brad. In the fourth round against Caroline Wozniacki, Coco faced her first true test. The Danish star, making a remarkable return to the sport, had gone up a break in the second set, and the crowd was starting to turn. Hoping to help his star rebound, Coach Brad started shouting instructions from the player's box. But to Coco, he was getting a bit too amped up, and disrupting her focus. "Please stop," she instructed him, and he did for a moment. But in the next game, he picked it up again, to which Coco, a bit more bluntly this time, told him to stop talking. After silencing her box, Coco went on to steamroll the third set and advance to the quarters. She appreciated the coaching, she remarked afterwards, but sometimes she needed to figure out the match for herself. Coco continued to figure things out in that tournament, so much so that she advanced all the way to the semis. Facing Karolina Mukova, Coco coasted to a 1-set lead and was looking strong in the second, when all of a sudden a disruption from the stands brought the match to a screeching halt. Several protesters in the nosebleed seats had stood up and started chanting. Wearing shirts that read "End Fossil Fuels," they were calling for action on a problem which to them couldn't be ignored. Fans booed relentlessly, while security less than quickly intervened and managed to remove 2 of the 3 protesters. But the third wouldn't budge from his seat, and once the cops arrived, they realized he had glued his bare feet to the cement floor. After somehow securing some glue remover, the police detached him, and the match resumed after a 49-minute delay. Coco closed out the final set, and in her press conference said that while she wished it hadn't been during her match, she couldn't get upset at the disruptors, because she believed in climate change and the protest was done in a peaceful way. Far from peaceful is the game of Belarusian star Aryna Sabalenka, whose serve is one of the hardest ever recorded in women's tennis. Returning it poses a major challenge, and one that Coco would have to overcome in the final to win her first major. After losing the first set in crushing fashion, it seemed like she couldn't do so at all. However, a now resilient and adaptable Coco let the match come to her, playing patiently and simply trying to land each shot in play. Sabalenka, unable to overpower her opponent, began to spiral, committing 46 unforced errors, allowing Coco to win the second set and go up big in the third. Serving for the championship, Coco, willed on by the infectious energy of Arthur Ashe, closed out the match and became US Open champion.
Honestly, thank you to the people who didn't believe in me.
Now that she's won her first major, there's no telling what Coco might do next. But she's not taking things too seriously. In the build-up to the 2024 Australian Open, the USTA released a hype post for the tournament on social media, a post which Coco quickly slammed as hideous and foul. What was so messed up coming from American tennis's own governing body? Well, it was a drawing depicting US tennis stars in the style of the late 90s cartoon The Wild Thornberrys, which also takes place in Australia. Coco clearly did not like the art style, and to be fair, it is pretty hideous. But fans of the show shouldn't be taken aback, since she was born the same year the series stopped airing, and there's a good chance she's never seen it. Because Coco, she's part of a new generation. She'll let you know what she thinks even though her game speaks for itself. And it's saying one thing loud and clear: the future is now, and tennis is in good hands.